In a world where international trade deals are like a high-stakes poker game, every move is calculated, every bluff is scrutinized, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Imagine a room filled with the most powerful leaders on the planet, each representing the economic might of their nations, sitting across from each other with the fate of millions hanging in the balance. The tension is palpable, the air thick with anticipation, and every decision could tip the scales of global prosperity or plunge entire economies into chaos. This is the arena where Donald Trump, the self-proclaimed master negotiator, decided to make his boldest play yet. Donald Trump just made Europe fold. How did he do it? Stick around to find out. But before we dive into the details, let's set the stage. The world has watched as the US and Europe, two economic giants, have sparred for decades over trade imbalances, tariffs, and market access. But never before had the drama reached such a fever pitch as it did in 2025. Trump, never one to shy away from confrontation, saw an opportunity to rewrite the rules of the game, and he seized it with both hands. It's 2025, and after months of intense negotiations and near trade war meltdowns, the world's attention was glued to the ongoing talks. The media buzzed with speculation, markets trembled with uncertainty, and behind closed doors, diplomats worked around the clock to prevent a catastrophic breakdown in relations. The stakes? Hundreds of billions in trade, millions of jobs, and the very future of transatlantic cooperation. Trump and Europe's leaders inked a colossal trade deal. But this wasn't just any agreement, this was a deal forged in the crucible of economic brinkmanship. A pact that would reshape the balance of power between the US and the European Union for years to come. The signing ceremony was a spectacle in itself. Flashes from cameras, the clatter of pens on paper, and the forced smiles of leaders who knew they had just made history, for better or worse. The US slapped a hefty 15% tariff on European exports, staving off a threatened 30% doomsday scenario. For months, the spectre of a full-blown trade war had loomed large, with both sides threatening escalating tariffs that could have crippled industries and sent shockwaves through the global economy. In the end, the 15% tariff was seen as a compromise, painful, yes, but far less devastating than the alternative. But why did Europe agree to this? On the surface, it seemed like a capitulation, a surrender to American pressure. But the reality was far more complex. European leaders faced a perfect storm of challenges: economic stagnation, political divisions, and the ever-present threat of American tariffs that could devastate key industries. Behind the scenes, diplomats agonized over every clause, every percentage point, knowing that the wrong move could trigger a crisis of confidence in the European project itself. Well, when Trump threatened to hammer European cars with a 25% tariff, the message was clear: no one was safe. The auto industry, a crown jewel of the European economy and a source of national pride for countries like Germany, suddenly found itself in the crosshairs. The threat wasn't just about money, it was about identity, about the future of an industry that employs millions and drives innovation across the continent. Germany's auto industry hit the panic button. Executives scrambled to assess the potential fallout. Analysts warned of factory closures and mass layoffs, and politicians faced mounting pressure from unions and business leaders alike. The headlines screamed of impending disaster, and the sense of urgency was impossible to ignore. For Germany, and by extension the entire EU, the stakes had never been higher. Add Brexit jitters and internal EU squabbles, and you have a recipe for chaos. The United Kingdom's messy divorce from the EU had already shaken the bloc's confidence, exposing deep divisions and raising questions about the future of European unity. As the trade talks with the US heated up, these internal rifts made it even harder for Europe to present a united front, and you get a recipe for capitulation. The pressure was relentless. Every day brought new headlines, new rumors, and new fears. Would the EU hold together, or would the strain prove too much? In the end, the need for stability and the desire to avoid economic catastrophe won out. Europe blinked first, but not without extracting some concessions of its own. Europe also promised to splash out 514 billion euros in the US, a staggering sum that would flow into American factories, infrastructure, and technology. This wasn't just about appeasing Trump, it was about securing access to the world's largest consumer market and ensuring that European companies could continue to compete on a global stage. The investment was framed as a win-win, but not everyone was convinced. and buy 647 billion euros in American energy. This part of the deal was especially controversial. Europe, long dependent on Russian gas and Middle Eastern oil, agreed to dramatically increase its purchases of American liquefied natural gas and other energy products. Supporters argued that this would enhance Europe's energy security and reduce its reliance on unstable regions. Critics, however, saw it as a costly concession that would drive up prices for consumers and undermine Europe's own green energy ambitions. The response, a mix of relief and outrage. In the streets of Berlin, Paris and Rome, protesters decried what they saw as a sellout to American interests. Business leaders, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that the worst-case scenario had been averted. The political fallout was immediate, with opposition parties seizing on the deal as evidence of weak leadership and a failure to stand up to Trump's bullying tactics. Some called it a necessary evil, a bitter pill to swallow in order to preserve the greater good. Political analysts filled the airwaves with heated debates, dissecting every aspect of the agreement and speculating about its long-term consequences. Was this the price of peace or a sign of Europe's declining influence on the world stage? Others saw it as Europe bowing to Trump's art of the deal. For Trump and his supporters, the deal was a vindication of his hard-nosed approach to diplomacy. They pointed to the concessions won from Europe as proof that America could still dictate terms on the global stage. For critics, however, it was a humiliating climb down that would haunt Europe for years to come. But did it end there? Not quite. The ink was barely dry on the agreement when new disputes began to surface. Issues like digital taxes, agricultural subsidies, and environmental standards threatened to reignite tensions at any moment. Both sides knew that the deal was only a temporary truce in a much larger struggle for economic supremacy. Steel tariffs are still in play, a lingering reminder that not all wounds had healed. The US and Europe continued to spar over the future of their steel industries, with each side accusing the other of unfair practices and protectionism. For workers in Pennsylvania and the Ruhr Valley alike, the uncertainty was far from over, and more negotiations loom. The world watched as diplomats prepared for yet another round of talks, each side determined to protect its interests and avoid being outmaneuvered. The stakes remained sky high, and the outcome was anything but certain. So, was it a stroke of negotiating genius or sheer chaos? The answer depends on who you ask. For some, Trump's aggressive tactics forced Europe to confront uncomfortable truths and make tough choices. For others, the whole episode was a dangerous game of brinkmanship that risked plunging the world into recession. What's clear is that the story is far from over, and the next chapter could be even more dramatic. Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this a masterclass in deal-making or a reckless gamble with global consequences? Your opinion matters, and we want to hear from you. Join the conversation below and share your thoughts on the future of US-Europe relations. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more global drama decoded. We'll be following this story as it unfolds, bringing you the latest updates, expert analysis, and behind-the-scenes insights you won't find anywhere else. Stay tuned, because in the world of international trade, the only constant is change.